sudden development of the body at a tremendous rate of speed. Not only the body, but the mind. This mind became equivalent to the rapid growth of the body, so that in 6 months the mind attained a basic maturity that would normally have required 15 to 18 years. The child became mentally a man, with a man's attitudes, his approach to life, his acceptances, his thoughtfulness, and all of the elements with which we associate the normal state of maturity. Postmortem proved that this boy had a kind of abscess or tumor on the pineal gland. And evidently, as a regulator, it lost the power to regulate the growth process. Not simply the body, but the growth of the being in the body. Meaning, of course, only one thing, namely an unbalance in the link by means of which being operates upon body, which permitted being to move into body too rapidly and without adequate controls, and the result, the destruction of the body. So that the gland, therefore, has, through clinical research, more or less supported the presumption or the supposition that it has a regulating effect, and that consciousness itself is in some way released into the general structure through this important glandular center. The ancients, if we can still borrow them a little for further thinking, had much to support this in their legends and their lore and their myths. In a way, this gland seems to play the part of the two-faced Janus, the deity which the Latins regarded as the lord of peace and war. This deity had two faces, one facing forward and the other backward, one assumably facing outward and the other inward, and that this deity represented this gland, which has two processes within it. One is that in its being faced outward, it bestows a superior cognition upon things outwardly seen. And when faced inward, it bestows an intuitional or inspirational insight into the causes of things and into the nature of self. That in both cases, this function is more or less occurring all the time. And what we do not realize, I suspect strongly, in our psychology and other researches, is that man is now, for the most part, looking both ways at once, but as yet has not been able to reconcile the mental confusion resulting therefrom, with the result that we use now the insight that we possess merely to interpret the functions of the outer sensory perceptions. We have not recognized that they possess a power or purpose of themselves. Now, in the brain also, there is this other small body, which is called the pituitary body. Perhaps one of the simplest things that we can liken it to is one of the retorts of an old alchemist. It looks very much like a bottle. It has an anterior and a posterior part, and secretes a material which is called pituitrin. This gland was likewise of great interest to the ancients. We do not know just exactly why they were so fascinated by it, but we can have a suspicion or two about this particular thing. In the first place, the pineal gland is in its shape very definitely a masculine symbol. The pituitary body is a feminine symbol. It is a receptive symbol. And long ago it was assumed that in the human brain there were two mysterious bodies resembling embryos, and that one of these was male and the other female, and that all mental or conscious process of the human being was the result of a generation taking place, a process taking place between the male and female polarities in the brain, and that these polarities were represented by these two glands. Thus, in the Parzival story, the pineal gland plays the part of the sacred spear of Longinus, the centurion, and the pituitary body takes the part of the sangreal, or the holy cup, these two being the wonderful relics of the ancient faith that were preserved in the castle on the top of Mount Salvat in Moorish Spain. Always this castle is on the top of the mountain, and in most of the representations of it, it is a domed building, perhaps slightly resembling our grand old planetarium out here in Griffith Park. But it was always a domed building, and this domed building was the brain. And it was here that the knights of the mysterious service of the Grail gathered for the celebration of the Eucharist, seated around this great table, much as in the table of Arthur, King of Britain, the table of Camelot. And here also we have the same mystery as the 12 paladins of Charlemagne, the 12 knights who represented the servants of the Sangreal mystery. And we have, of course, the orders of the quest. We have man searching for the mystery of the Holy Grail and the spear of Longinus. It is also noted that in the case of Parzival, when Amfortas, the second king of the Grail, took the holy spear down into the valley to use it against the evil magician Klingsor, he threw the spear at the magician, who, however, caught it and threw it back, wounding the Grail king with his own spear. This was much made of in the mystical legends, for it represented the danger of using this power for a destructive purpose, even though that destructive purpose seemed to be justified. In other words, reality will never be discovered by violence, even if it is a violent effort to discover reality. It just cannot be done that way. Two wrongs cannot make a right. They simply make two wrongs and things get worse. But the story of the Grail and the Holy Spear also will be found in the legends of alchemy, where we have the mysterious processes necessary to the perfection of the wise man's stone, the mysterious symbol of the immortal soul consciousness of man. The pituitary body, therefore, is known to secrete a mysterious dew that is called the brain dew in the Kabbalah, and plays a very important part in the distribution of energy. The great Belgian chemist Jean-Baptiste van Helmont declared the mystery of dew. He said that dew captures in it the rays of heaven. And the brain dew of the ancient Kabbalists is supposed to have been impregnated with the energy of the pineal gland and flowing from the pituitary body. This dew, which has then become the carrier of the consciousness of the pineal gland, is then distributed throughout the body, carrying with it certain power, certain meaning, certain consciousness factor, perhaps something we do not even suspect, namely that it may bestow a kind of conditioned consciousness upon even the smallest cellular unit in the body. Now, in the case of the pituitary body, we have certain definite indications that this gland will affect health, that it can be held as a physical growth controlling factor, even as the pineal is a consciousness growing factor. So that we seem to have here the master glands of a system, by means of which consciousness and body are held in equilibrium, and by means of which also the purposes of consciousness and psychic energy are distributed throughout the body. This gives us a possible conscious definition, namely that in the pineal gland we have the seat of consciousness, or the focal point, by means of which consciousness and body meet. And in the pituitary body we have the seat of psychic knowing, this thing that we call the soul. That therefore psychic phenomena in general, and the disturbances of the psyche in various psychological problems, may ultimately be traced definitely to the pituitary body, where we have certain danger of aberration. That aberration may arise in the pituitary, and clarification in the pineal has been suspected for a very, very long time. The development of the pituitary body also seemingly has a very strong bearing upon the sense of smell. That in some way this gland was anciently controlled or directed by means of what were called fumigations. In other words, incense, various types of odors, as in the story of the frankincense in religion, that the pituitary body responded primarily to the vibration of odor, and that it can be affected and modified in its function by various odors. That as a reaction to this, it means a certain kind of vibration, for odor is only possible as the result of vibration. The gland in its normal function has also a body normalizing factor, and in cases of disturbance of this gland, we have the tendency perhaps to obesity, or perhaps again to extreme thinness and loss of bodily quality and sufficiency. The gland, when it goes on one of these so-called rampages, produces a distinct physical condition. Now, it is also noted that wherever this gland with its physical problem becomes acute, we seem to have an increase in psychic sensitivity. Nearly all psychics have been inclined to be heavy. They have been inclined to indicate that a certain type of sensitivity is to be associated with at least a minor imbalance of this gland, and that where the individual is hale and hearty and the gland is working perfectly, he does not seem to be as much subject to imagination, to violent internal experiences, to a kind of unworldliness of attitude, as we find in a great many persons who have a heavier physical structure indicating a different pattern of gland function. Also, the effect of sugar on this gland will have to be further examined, because it does tie up in some way with the pancreas. And it's quite possible that the pancreas represents the lower pole of this gland. The function of the various glands through the body are not too difficult. Most persons have had some fair knowledge of them. The principal endocrine glands, of course, are, in addition to what we have mentioned, the thyroid, the thymus, the suprarenal cortex, which is really a double structure, resting in the form of a gland on the cap of each kidney, and the liver, which is the logic